Oh, hi there. I've decided to make a video. It's 3:10 a.m. in the morning, but I wanted to make it anyway. And plus, it's very hot, so it's hard to stay asleep. Anyway, I just watched WarCraft The Beginning. I've actually owned the DVD for over a year, since before HMV closed down, and it was still in its packaging. I just hadn't gotten around to it. I got a lot of DVDs that are still in their packaging. And it was one of those movies that whenever you ask somebody about it, if you would do so, they'd say, "Oh, I heard it was bad." And for a lot of people, that puts them off. Just a simple gesture of someone telling them that it's bad will put them off, or it might encourage them to watch it if someone says it's good. I mean, no further explanations needed. They just kind of have sheep-like mentality and go along with it. And I mean, the reviews were terrible. Rotten Tomatoes said a bunch of horrible things about it. IMDb wasn't too harsh on it, but they weren't particularly kind from what I read. Um, okay, we're going to compare this because you can't help but do so when it comes to dealing with orcs versus humans and elves and things of that nature. You can't help but compare it to Lord of the Rings. Uh, I would say The Hobbit as well, but I'm not going to cover that part because, well, for two reasons. One, so far, I don't actually particularly like The Hobbit too much. I've not even gone through the third movie yet. I'm about one-third of the way through the Battle of the Five Armies, where Thorin is talking to Bilbo, and he's sort of drifting out because he's going on about the Arkenstone, and really what it's doing is what's going on is it's the ring in Bilbo Baggins' pocket that's making him go like that. That's about as far as I've gotten into the movie, and it's got kind of an interesting story. But anyway, I'll make another video about the Hobbit franchise later. Right now, I'm just going to compare Lord of the Rings and the Warcraft movie. Lord of the Rings, you know, everybody loved it when it came out. I did, and it won numerous awards, got high praise, and it was a well put together movie. Also, didn't feel too rushed, which The Hobbit kind of did feel like. Um, and Warcraft, it received harsh criticism. Um, I admit, kind of the way the cities were structured, the way their armor, weaponry, it looked a bit cheesy. But the orcs themselves, these big hulking brutes, I thought they looked appropriate for, the Warcraft franchise. Obviously, they look different than they did in Lord of the Rings. But there were some key points I wanted to point out. Warcraft had a budget of 160 million. It bombed in the box office in the US and made like 47. It made a lot in China for whatever reason. I mean, they pirate everything anyway. I don't understand how it made money, but somehow it did. And worldwide, it made about 430 million, which is, acceptable numbers in my opinion. That looks like profit. Um, and the storyline, wasn't too bad. But Lord of the Rings, their budget was 93 million for the first movie estimated, and 94 for the second and the third each. And when you're dealing with numbers like that, people have a tendency to lie. Um, and given how little outsiders know of Hollywood and what goes on in there and all their little rules and just the way they do things, you can't trust those figures. I mean, I'm sure they weren't spending money needlessly. I'm sure Peter Jackson wasn't just, throwing, rubber bands filled with $5,000 around wherever he felt like, but you can't trust those numbers. Anyway, Lord of the Rings, when it came out, it was revolutionary. There hadn't been a like a fantasy type thing like that that was any good before that. I mean, there were some other movies, but they're just not the same thing as Lord of the Rings. But the thing is, what people don't take into consideration is 93 million bucks uh, in 2001 was worth a lot more than it is now. It's something like $40 million difference because of inflation. I checked about half hour ago, and I don't exactly remember what the numbers are, but it's a significant chunk. Um, and in lies the problem with Warcraft. It's not that I thought many of the actors were cheesy in it. It's just I had never heard of any of them before. Clancy Brown, that was a face. Like I've seen that guy's face, and I went, maybe I'm just ignorant. Maybe he is in a lot of movies. So I check his IMDb, and you know what, he's been in a few of things, but most of them have been TV shows, or he's doing a voice for a cartoon or something like that, and he's in the scene, but he's not really somewhat famous or anything like that. Not many people think of him. And the other guy was Daniel Wu, who played Gul'dan. He's obviously of Asian origin. He originates from Asia. He was born in California. Most of Warcraft was filmed in Vancouver, I believe. And, um, you know, um, there was a very creepy element to Warcraft. Um, it's not, you know, like I wasn't thinking it was that dark when I first watched it. I mean, obviously, I played the game Warcraft 3 when it came out, and I'm of that generation that played Warcraft 3 and then looked at World of Warcraft and went, "This is a pile of shit, and I don't want to play it." And there are other people who play World of Warcraft and they have no idea what Warcraft 3 was like. And it's the same crap. It's the same thing. It's a generational thing. It's the same thing with guys who played Diablo 2, who played StarCraft 1, and then the new versions came out and they wanted to do different things, and it was terrible. The storylines were terrible and they were just awful. Um, okay, so there's that part of it. But getting back to the dark element, in Warcraft 3, in particular Frozen Throne, there was an undead army. That was, the army that Prince Arthas, ended up leading. Um, However, none of that's included in this because this is all about Warcraft and the original sort of storyline with the humans versus the orcs. There aren't really any other types of groups out there. I did notice the Draenei made a brief appearance. They were the little blue people that were being sacrificed to open the demon gates so the orcs could invade. I don't even think it was called Lordaeron that they were invading. I forgot the name of this the settlements that they were going into. Um, but at this point, the humans had never heard of orcs before. Whereas in Warcraft 3, obviously, they'd had dealings with them in the previous games. Warcraft 1, I vaguely remember that game, but I remember it being very terrible. It was like a Nintendo game, basically. And Warcraft 2, the storyline, is kind of interesting, but they just make the orcs sound like bloodthirsty brutes, which technically they are. And in Warcraft 3, they kind of tried to, add some sophistication to them. And that's what they did in this movie. And, for, like a PG type audience, I suppose it's the right thing to do. But, when I think of orcs, I think of, savages, really. But they did have some modicum of, being civilized, considering. But yeah, of course, Gul'dan was using souls to open the gate for the orcs to enter um, the human realm, because everything from where they came from was dead. They came from a desert, destroyed planet, and they say it was because of Gul'dan's magic. The Fel is what they called it, where he had this power, but he was only able to use it when he was stealing basically the life essence of whomever. So they usually had the mindset of go in there, conquer, and take prisoners to be sacrificed to Fel. Um, you know, it's kind of creepy when you go to think about it. Especially, there's just some things you got to take into consideration. It was filmed in Vancouver. It did well in China. Um, the main villain in it is of Asian descent. I'm sure the guy is nice as can be, and he's perfectly, all right. But what people don't understand is in movies, it is very serious who plays what role and why. And, it really can be up to skin color and what ethnic ethnicity that they are. And I mean, Gul'dan, all the orcs were all CGI big time. Um, that was another little bit of a cheesy thing with Warcraft, was everything looked, very CGI, and a lot of people are put off by that. But the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand about movies, in particular ones that are of fantasy of nature, or designed to be a caricature, uh, more like. The thing is, they derive from like sort of a distortion of a real story. Um, because humans, we're not actually very good at inventing things. We like to think that we are, but and compared to every other animal on the planet, we are. But as a whole, we're not actually that good at inventing things. And usually, what we do is we take an idea and we either make it better or we distort it and to tell it in a different sort of way. And when you're talking about portals and how you need souls to open them, uh, which did fall along in the Warcraft 3 storyline. I mean, the very first Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos was about bringing the Demon Lord Archimonde into Lordaeron with the Burning Legion. And, when you start to think about it, like, you're living in Vancouver, there's a high population of Asians, and there are a lot of parts in Asia where people are in fact slaves. And that's not me being racist or me being a bastard to point that out. That's them being the most despicable people on the planet. I'm sorry if you happen to be of the same race as them, but you have nothing to do with what they do. But those people are trash. In the Western world, we don't do things like that. And it's just like, unfortunately, when you start looking at a movie like this, it's kind of hard to turn off that switch and go, oh, it's just a story, don't pay too much attention to it, whatever. Because it's like, no, there's clearly a message here. Uh, because no doubt, through proxy, Chinese mainland, through Hong Kong, wants to bring more of their people over here. And some people would go, well, we do have arguments for why, you know, we should be more diverse and and bring in more immigrants and things like that, uh, especially under a Justin Trudeau government. Um, he knows all the bad things that go on in the world, and he still goes up there with his porcelain face and pretends like, what's there to worry about, blah, blah, blah. You don't realize it, but you're getting fucked over. Things are getting worse, and you're too stupid to understand because we just restrict all that information. Maybe he's right for doing it, maybe he's not. But the fact of the matter is, somebody's got to close that demon gate, because there most certainly is a Gul'dan type character in Asia that wants to bring his army here. And he will do most heinous things to get the army over to here. And obviously that is not in our best interest. And, you know, this mincing kind of, we'll just sort of slow things down so it doesn't feel like there's just this big tidal wave of people coming over here, because, you know, us white people could really feel like we're outnumbered all of a sudden real quick if, you know, and it could just happen just like that. After 1997, that's when it was really noticeable that a lot of people from Hong Kong were coming over here. And, you know, it's one thing if they come here and they're young and, you know, they sort of get into sort of a Western philosophy of thinking of things, but not all of them do. A lot of them, you know, very stick to their traditional beliefs and their understanding of the world, and they make it a point not to speak English properly. A lot more of them out there than you think. You know, I think if you're going to live in Canada, you should have to have a Western belief system. I think that's standard protocol. And like, you know, sometimes they can be very nice. You know, people who you know, make it a point not to, you know, kind of immerse themselves into Western culture. But, you know, in reality, they don't really like us. And, you know, that's just, you know, not an understatement. That's just the truth. It's just, I was looking at this movie and I was, you know, the whole time I was looking at it from a, you know, I'm over 30 years old. I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Um, and, you know, they were, it was just, like, it was really, really creepy. Like the Draenei. I know there are ethnic groups within Asia that are particularly abused. Falun Gong is the typical one that gets spun around, but there are other ones that get it a lot worse. Falun Gong are the poster group of people who are particularly abused. But there are other ones too, and they get it a whole lot worse. And it's, you know, like an ancestral thing. Like it's just, you know, they were enemies for, you know, hundreds of years within China, because what people don't understand about China is not one single unified country. There are different sectors of it and things like that that don't like each other. And it's also a very poor country, kind of like, oh, I don't know, Draenor, where the orcs that came from, where it was desolate, there was nothing there. There was the one dominant race, which was the orcs, and you know, the lesser races like the Draenei. I really like the Draenei in Warcraft 3 when they allied with Illidan. I thought that was awesome, and I felt real bad for them. They were drawn kind of ugly, but you know, that aside, the Draenei were respectable in Warcraft 3. and you got to rope Warcraft 3 in with Warcraft, the movie. And, you know, it's a question mark whether they're going to make another one or not. I've actually read in the top few Google searches that Warcraft 2 may never be published in the United States. And why might that be? Because it didn't make any money here, but it made a lot of money in Asia, evidently. So what's to stop the Asians from going, well, we'll take this story and do whatever we want with it, and, you know, that'll just be our kind of story that's a regional thing, and you dumb white people over here will never even hear about it. And it tells a tale a little bit differently, a little bit of a different spin. Um, you know, there's a lot of things to consider, like all the, you know, hypotheticals, you know, caricature type style, um, the kind of uh, the subtlety of the movie. Uh, I I I got most of it. I picked up and I was able to decipher information as I was watching it as an older person. And you know, I could make YouTube videos where I say the mainstream narrative about the movie, maybe even compliment it and things like that, but it would, you know, immediately, you know, get the thumbs down and nobody will want to hear about it. But, you know, that's not what my YouTube channel's ever been about. I say the things that other people do not have the courage to say because, oh, I'll lose subscribers, oh, I'll get demonetized. Well, I look at it as they were never going to monetize me anyway. I got trolls out there that say pretty mean things about me anyway. Um, I don't get self-gratification by looking at my view count anyway. So, you know what? I'm going to tell the story the way I want to do it on my channel. And I'm telling you, Warcraft was a good movie that talked about bad things in a more palatable type of way. Because I am in the firm belief that there are numbers of peoples that are in cages made of bamboo that are too small, and they really are carted around as if they're made for sacrifice. They're meat products and things like that. I mean, what we see over here in the West is, you know, their abuse of animals, of all animals. Everything's fair game for them. Over here, uh, you get people on vegan Facebook pages, and they are the worst. You don't even know what side they're on. You just know that they talk in a very dirty manner. And you know, as a grocery business type guy, I don't put up with that, man. Like, there are normal things, and then there are not normal things, okay? There is no comparison. Uh, and you know, in Warcraft, they did make it a point to abduct humans, um, essentially white people, uh, to feed as souls to open the demon gate and allow more orcs to come in. Of course, Medivh, well-respected guardian of the Warcraft franchise, and particularly Warcraft 3. Of course, he went corrupt and was like gonna let them in. That was never described exactly why he just all of a sudden became corrupt. They just started noting upon him and his corruption, and you know, and then in the end he becomes some sort of demon lord or something like that. And yeah, he's trying to openly let him in, and one of the main heroes stops him, along with a Kiran Sir boy. They were able to put a stop to that guy. So I would presume that there will be no Guardian if there is a Warcraft 2. I think there should be, um, but we'll have to see. Because I mean, like I know I'm making these dark, kind of looking into this in kind of a dark kind of a way, but it's not that much different from Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was there. There was the Kingdom of Rohan, Gondor, the Elfland Woodlands, Riverdale, or Riverview. You know what? I just saw an Archie comic in the grocery store, so it's just throwing me off right now. But anyway, and then there was Mordor. Okay, so it's not much of a different story kind of thing. Mordor, the horrible place where horrible things happen to people, because it's very poor, but they have a very vicious, very scary army. Because I mean, there were some instances where you look in Mordor, particularly in Return of the King, and you go, hold on, that guy is, you know, uh, some sort of salesman, or whatever you call it within the orc encampment, and he has skeletons that look suspiciously like humans. Uh, there's that, and of course, when they catapulted Gondor for the first time, it was with human heads. That is a pretty spooky tactic, and that is something that used to happen. They used to catapult bodies over walls because just a dead rotten body. It's covered in disease and fear. So what I'm trying to get at is I think Warcraft deserves a second um, movie, um, and I think the first one, people, if they watched it and they went into the mindset when they were watching it, oh, I've been told it's bad, therefore it is bad. Look how cheesy their armor is and things like that. And that immediately it just sets off the chain reaction that they don't like the movie. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of things I don't like about Warcraft, but they're more intelligent than tacky looking armor. They're kind of like more like serious, like this movie, it's for a younger generation that doesn't understand these type of things, but it it has some messages in there, man. And I'm just here, man, in my post over here in Vancouver, and I'm going, I don't want the Demon Gate being open and a lot more. How shall we put it? People who do not have Western ideals coming into the country. I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't think that's too hard to explain to people either. Like Justin Trudeau and this propaganda of him allowing ISIS fighters to return. Now let's get one thing straight. ISIS fighters. That's a name for somebody you don't know. You don't know what they were doing or why they were doing it, and presumably they're of Arab descent or whatever, and all that kind of crap. Um, and people are getting really steamed about it, and they say, oh well, they're getting an allowance of $1,600 or something like that to come back after fighting in Syria or whatever, and that's all just propaganda. I think if they were called upon to do something for the Canadian government and they went over there and infiltrated as spies and actually did good for this country, that's one thing. But the news has distorted that image into these are ISIS fighters and they've done things like all kinds of horrible things that you typically hear. And this is the same message over and over and over again, right? And then you get, as I made a video of, of Omar Khadr. Now, supposedly he was awarded 10 million bucks, and I had made the point that no, he didn't. The real Omar Khadr is a puddle of puke. I don't know about literally, although it could be possible. Um, but he's definitely in no state to any amount of money is not going to help him. And it's money did get transferred to people who are a bit shady, untrustworthy, and this is what the Trudeau government's been a lot about. Like, there's been a lot of payoffs to bad people, and he's trying to put a friendly face on a bad situation. And the fact of the matter is he hasn't actually let that many refugees in. Like, just hardly noticeable. But it's still brought up, and this all connects. Like Warcraft and Lord of the Rings and a little bit of The Hobbit. They're all metaphorical things of this type of thing. And I remember being told before by people, oh, I don't believe in hobbits. I don't believe in orcs. They don't exist, blah, blah, blah. And, I made the argument of saying they spend hundreds of millions of dollars creating these characters on the big screen. Don't tell me that a hobbit doesn't exist. Don't tell me that an orc doesn't exist. But obviously some people have a different definitions of what's real and what's not. To me, aliens are real because they make alien movies. They may not exist in the traditional definition of them, but they do exist. And there was a lot of dark things about Warcraft and Lord of the Rings too. Like, I mean, I had heard stories and things like that of Lord of the Rings. I'm pretty sure at this point you can't buy an original copy of Lord of the Rings, and besides, it would be, grammatically really hard to understand and things like that. But it does tell a tale that they don't quite mention in the movie. I mean, a lot of things happen in books that they just don't have the time to put into a movie. And it was said that Lord of the Rings was basically filtered through Peter Jackson when he put it in, because there was just some things he obviously didn't like about the original one. They may have been metaphorical things of things that were true, but he left that out and he changed the story and made it more, it had more of a we're winning kind of attitude. Whereas Warcraft did not have that attitude at all. And another thing we got to consider is that Warcraft is open opposition. They're the competition to Lord of the Rings. So there's a lot of Lord of the Rings people who've invested their money into Lord of the Rings. They're all about Lord of the Rings that want to put down the competition. Because let's remember, in 2004, that is when Warcraft 3 came out, the video game. And, obviously that is when Return of the King was made. It wasn't made in 2003. No, I think it was made in 2004. It doesn't matter, whatever, it's technicality. It's not important. Especially compared to the other things I was talking about. It almost sounds like a hostage exchange or something like that when it comes to Gul'dan and these kind of like exchange of souls so that they can bring their soldiers over. And I've seen particularly what politics has done in Canada, and I've seen what it's done in Vancouver, and it really feels like it's a message that there isn't a good way to tell it, and there are a lot of douchebags running around out there that are actually going along with the mainstream narrative. Um, yeah, you do that. I'm not going to. And you're nowhere near intelligent enough to persuade me otherwise. I'm sorry to say, but you know, the people who are in power today, who are trying to push certain agendas and things like that, for whatever their reasons, are stupid. They may be knowledgeable about a lot of things, but they are stupid and biased. And okay, I'm a little bit biased, a little bit ignorant. Some people may go, well, you're a little bit stupid, but that's like your opinion, man. So, like I could do a whole series on, you know, comparisons of Lord of the Rings, Warcraft, and even The Hobbit when I get around to watching the whole thing. I just, there's reasons I didn't want. I've been hesitant to watch the whole thing. It's just, I didn't think it was that good, to be honest with you. Um, well, yeah. Well, what other points do I want to make about this thing? Like, uh, there were other subtleties that were in the movie that, like, they weren't that offensive, but there was definitely an undertone of creepiness in that whole movie. But it's kind of masked by the cheesiness of particularly the towns and the armor and all that sort of thing. And it's it's a bit of like a little play on things. It's almost as if the invasion is justified because their home world, the orcs' home world, has been turned into a fiery ash pit. But when you look at the orcs, although native tribes, when Europeans came here, were not bulky and they were not the invaders. They weren't, like giant, big, strong orcs. It's almost like a comparison that when the white Europeans first came here, we were the orcs, and we justified what we were doing because Europe was, very, very bad condition. Not just because we were still evolving in our architectural abilities, and there were sewer problems, and there were all sorts of problems in Europe, and we were able to fix a lot of those problems when we came over here. And then somehow these fast forward to today, and you see these orcs in Warcraft, if you want to be metaphorical about it, as elite fighters. Like all the male orcs were like big hulking guys, and they were like all great fighters, and they could squash the humans like bugs. Like it was always known in Warcraft that Grunt was stronger than a foot soldier, but he wasn't stronger than a paladin or a knight on a horse. There was a bit more of a balance. It didn't seem like these orcs were, like a good 600-pound heavier than a human, which, in reality is kind of like a bear. Like, imagine fighting a bear, like a big bear. Um, well, actually, size proportionally, they would have to be more than 600 pounds heavier. Because remember, this is all muscle that they had, right? So those orcs that were there, which were only grunts in the video games, um, decent fighter, but they weren't the best. They were just like they cost more to maintain, to train, more food and resources and all that sort of stuff. But they weren't that much stronger than a foot soldier. 2 foot soldiers could take on a grunt. But not in this movie. It's like if the humans didn't have their agility, and let's face it, if you're wearing a lot of armor, you're not going to have a lot of agility. Um, yeah, it'd be very difficult to pull off certain maneuvers to, get an orc in his weakness. because the orcs were quite fast in this movie too. Like they could run and charge, and there was a scene where they were like hiding under a bunch of dirt, and they were able to surprise the party, in this big canyon, and it was just like supposing that like China is well known for having masses of people who have all sorts of eating disorders. Like people go, oh, it's America that has eating disorders. There are some eating disorders over here, but not like they are in Asia. They have all kinds of weird ones. A lot of them have tapeworms. A lot of them, they have to eat at certain points of the day. They have to have coffee, and if they don't, they become like very sick, and they just have all kinds of things like that. But it is plausible that they do have some modicum of an army that is elite. It is, like, and it's not a small number of people. It's like they were trained from day one to proper eating habits, workout, exercise, train the brain, and all these things on a scientific level, and they are essentially super soldiers. And those are the people they're going to try and send in. So what I'm saying to the Trudeau government, and I'm sure they are doing some kind of a job about doing that, is they have to make sure that those super soldiers don't come here and surprise us country bumpkins, because we're not really expecting them. Because that's the tone of today's societies. It's toned down that we shouldn't expect that. Don't worry about anything. Nothing's coming here, and it's good if you want to feel comfortable, but you don't want to wake up one day and realize that you're not in power and you're on the shit list, especially if you happen to be in a bamboo cage and your soul is going to be sacrificed to the demon gate or something equally horrible. Like I've been all over the page on this subject, but this you take a good look as an adult at WarCraft and go in there with a I'm not judging anything until I've seen it mentality. I'm not just going to listen to someone because they said it wasn't good, or I'm not going to listen to someone because they said it was good. I'm just going to go in there and rationalize, use deductive reasoning to understand what exactly it is. And, but there is strong element of, darkness about this whole subject. Obviously, it's been very carefully illustrated in a way where it doesn't seem as though it's that, but you have to see through it and really, really look at it. And I think I did, and I think I learned quite a bit from watching WarCraft. So I don't think it deserved harsh reviews based on the movie. Uh, Obviously, what it was metaphorically explaining is obviously not a very pleasant subject. But there's really no good way to tell it, but at least we have an understanding of certain things if people will only listen. Well, anyway, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I would recommend watching WarCraft. As a movie, I would give it, maybe a 7 or an 8. I wouldn't be, too critical about that point, because I'm just one of those people that, can watch something that is based on a caricature type thing and, try to see the deeper message and try and learn something from it. Anyway, I'm going to leave this review at that. And I think that Warcraft deserves a trilogy of its own because they were able to do a lot in 2 hours. They explained a lot of things. They got a lot done. And as a standalone movie, that it could do that, but it should be a trilogy, in my opinion. Anyway, feel free to leave comments in the section below if you feel like it. If you don't, whatever, I'm not going to read them anyway. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.